Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Chicanery. It is your usual host. I am Danny, and we have JT.
Hello, once again.
So, with apologies to Tomo, this was kind of a bangers and clangers sort of weekend. We had the Australian Grand Prix, and then we had Indy Club, or Indy at Thermal Club, rather. So to keep kind of the usual cadence, we will certainly get started on the Australian Grand Prix, but sort of between the two races, I know I say this every week, but it feels like there's a remarkable amount to cover. But first, a word from our sponsor, Homefield Apparel. Homefield has entered the thrilling world of motorsports with the Hendrick Motorsport Collection, which is available to pre-order now. Based out of Indianapolis, you likely already know Homefield for their high-quality, officially licensed collegiate apparel. You probably also know that they have more than 180 schools on their roster, so there's a little something for everyone. I mean, seriously, they even have my local Division II school, Wayne State University. Given Homefield's storied legacy and throwback college apparel and their relentless commitment to quality, moving to racing apparel seemed like the next logical step, and that's reaffirmed in their meticulous approach to designing the Hendrick Motorsport Collection. Iconic logos, legendary drivers, and unforgettable moments, this collection is a celebration of the golden era of NASCAR. Here at Victory Lane Vibes, we're super excited to get our hands on what Homefield has cooked up. Their collegiate wear is second to none, and in concert with some of the most legendary drivers and one of the most legendary teams in NASCAR history, the Hendrick Motorsports Collection is a banger. To learn more, visit www.homefieldapparel.com. Their online storefront is easy and convenient to navigate, making it that much easier for you to proudly represent your favorite drivers and relive NASCAR's glory days. And be sure to use promo code VLV24 for 15% off at checkout on your first order. Again, the Hendrick Motorsport Collection is available to pre-order now. Use promo code VLV24 for 15% off at checkout on your first order. And thanks again to Homefield Apparel for supporting this podcast. So I guess without further ado, we should jump right into it. Starting with sort of the pre-race stuff, the Australian Grand Prix race weekend got off to a rather auspicious start, with Alex Albon having an absolutely massive accident at turn 6, which, if memory serves, was like the exact same place that he wiped out at the very end of the race in 2023. And well, there was a lot about some of the growing pains that James Vowles spoke about at Saudi, about the growing pains with reorganization of Williams that really came to light. The team didn't even have a spare chassis, which is in the year of our Lord 2024 feels almost inconceivable, but they didn't.
The pinnacle
So
of motorsports, everybody. The team does not have a spare chassis. I mean, the Williams spare chassis was about as real as my sanity. Like, it just wasn't a thing. Apparently, it wasn't even built yet, so.
yeah, no, it's not. And we will get to that piece a little bit later, because there's been some added complications as a result of this weekend. But the end result of all of this was that Alex very promptly swiped Logan's car to run the rest of the race weekend. Mind you, Motorsports Twitter was in absolute omnishambles when this was announced. And honestly, for a change, kind of rightly so. I understand that Alex is very clearly the faster of the two drivers, but the dude who doesn't make a mistake and then has to pay for it ostensibly seems like I don't know. It seems a bit ass backwards, if I'm being perfectly honest. And to his credit, Albon admitted after the qualifying sessions. I do believe that after the decision was made to swap cars, that sort of the atmosphere within the garage was not good. Which it's like, yeah, no shit. Of course it's not going to be good when you're telling the guy who didn't write off his car that he can't race. And funny enough, even Max Verstappen chimed in going, yeah, this is kind of messed up. Now, granted, because this is Max, he went about 5 steps too far. He's like, I'd crash the car too. It's like, all right, dog, how about we not not do that? But I understand and I agree with the sentiment. It seems like a lot of folks thought it was kind of messed up that Logan was forced to sit out of race weekend for a mistake that wasn't of his creation. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think Williams' reputation has received quite this much of a battering since when Frank Williams was letting championship-winning drivers go like every season back in the 90s. And that really sank the team's stock.
I mean, I don't really think, like, I don't know. To me, it just feels like that Williams had, like, no faith in Sargent, like, at all. And it's kind of just like, because, I mean, I was basically just saying, like, well, what was the point of them even re-signing him for, like, this season if they were just going to, do that or treat him like that? And, like, I'm not a Logan Sargent fan in the slightest. I just think that it's kind of weird. It's like, okay, if you didn't even have trust that this dude was going to do what you wanted him to do, what was the point of re-signing him? And then, I mean, like, I don't know. What's also stopping them from pulling AlphaTauri and stacking him mid-season like they did with DeFries? They, for all intents and purposes, could do the same thing here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was personally a little surprised when Logan was re-signed, because I mean his inaugural season wasn't great, but he showed some signs of progress, and I'm like, huh, well, okay, and and that was sort of how they justified bringing him back on this year.
It was
And then
probably also because he was a development driver too, and it felt kind of like weird to just drop him after one season after they invested time and money into him.
And I was just about to say that too, that that was probably part of it. It still boggles my mind that Williams has a development driver pipeline, given how woeful they've been the last, off and on the last 10 years. But that's a podcast for a different day.
I mean,
But
personally, I feel like I don't know, I feel like if you end up junking your car in a practice session or qualifying or whatever, and the car has to be repaired, I feel like you have to live with those consequences. Either the car has to be repaired or it's damaged to the point where the team cannot fix it in time for the actual race and they just have to forfeit altogether. I just like, there's plenty of times where that has happened, like other racing series. And sometimes, like, okay, sometimes it's not that much damage and it can be repaired before the actual race. And then sometimes it does happen where, unfortunately, the team has to withdraw the car, the entry, because it's, again, damaged beyond repair and can't be fixed in time. So I'm like, I don't know. I feel like they should have just kept it as is. I mean, I don't even know if Williams actually scored any points this weekend. And it's like, I don't know. You went from, okay, we're going to kick off, like one dude junked the car in practice and we're going to kick out the other dude and put him in that car in place and still get nothing out of it. So I don't know. Maybe at the end of the day, Williams ended up with egg on their face anyways, because again, they got nothing out of this. So
yeah, so that's
clowns.
that's an amusing bit of foreshadowing. Certainly we'll get to that, but to answer your question immediately, no, Williams didn't get diddly or squat from the weekend. Albon did not score any points, which is very stupid, especially considering the team that scored double points this weekend, which, if you didn't watch the race, is actually going to surprise you a little bit. But we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. So I guess kind of after that, all the shenanigans of free practice, everything kind of quieted down, relatively speaking. Now, Perez and Hulkenberg got into it a bit during Q1. Well, and by that I mean Perez impeded Hulkenberg during Q1. So he lined after quali was all said and done on the road. He was P3, but he ended up lining up P6 because he got a penalty for it. But the biggest thing is that Tsunoda knocked our boy Lewis effectively out of Q3. Tsunoda was just on a banger of a lap, and it was enough to displace Lewis basically one spot. So Tsunoda P10, Lewis P11. And in this ongoing battle of the V-carb drivers, because that's been a thing that has popped up as a result of the fireworks at Bahrain at the start of the season. Daniel Ricciardo was out in Q1. He was just as slow as the Saubers and Alpines. There we go. My brain completely broke there. But yeah, he's slow. And this really does kind of beg the question. It's looking like the McLaren-era Ricciardo is making a bit of a return. It's not good. And there have been some post-race stuff. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit after. But Danny Ric could be in a little bit of hot water here if this keeps up. But moving on to race day. Verstappen made it worth my while staying up until midnight local time after getting a week of absolutely garbage sleep. Because apparently on the grid, the right rear brake caliper stuck and just completely burned up that corner. And Verstappen DNF'd on lap 3. The motorsports gods were smiling. Verstappen he's been grumping about kind of a loose car all race. I mean, granted, his whole race again was 3 whole laps, but he'd been complaining that the car was like it was loose and that it felt weird. And Carlos Sainz was all over the back of him, even getting an overtake done. And then you just see like this basically blue smoke, which was effectively the pad burning the brake disc, which was the heat was burning up the tire. And then you just get this big, basically you see, actually you can see it on the replay, you see the brake rotor on that corner explode and completely ruin like that whole wheel and tire assembly in the process. But funny enough, Verstappen's last DNF was actually Australia in 2022. So I don't know what it is, but something about Albert Park seems to have Verstappen snake bitten. But at any rate, Verstappen's DNF triggered a rash of early pit stops. You had a few folks who were really chancing it, and they started on softs because like Lewis was one of them. But the track temps were super high, and it just didn't work. And then for the next, actually really more like 3 or 4 laps, probably about half the field pitted, if I had to take a guess. And unfortunately, this is where Sauber and just their awful luck with cross-threaded wheel nuts continued because they didn't have any issues all through the free practice sessions or at all through qualifying. Then the first stop of the race, they cross-thread the wheel nut again.
I don't know what it is with Sauber and like their pit stops, but like they seem to always like they can never like cleanly execute pit stops. It seems like I was talking to a friend like while the race was going on, I was joking like you might as well go and work for the freaking their team and do a better job than they do. I mean, the friend works with the like an ARCA team. I'm like, you probably could do just as good as they can. I mean, I don't know what it is with them, but they just don't have it down.
Yeah, I know they had made some changes like with the wheel guns and the wheel nuts this season, and it seems like it's really what would cause this would be like a metallurgic defect. Sounds like there's a bit of thermal expansion that's going on when they're having these issues. So unfortunately, that is not going to be the kind of thing that they fix overnight because they're going to need to get like new of everything related to pit stops, particularly like the wheel guns and the wheel nuts. and that doesn't happen overnight. They had Sauber, they had talked about trying to just slow down the pit stops a bit. So versus 2 to 3.5 second stops, which is what's broadly classed as sort of a normal stop in F1. They would have just been okay with 5 and 6 second stops if it means that they didn't cross thread the wheel nut. But unfortunately, that really hasn't come to pass. But I feel like we're gonna need a Valtteri Bottas sympathy corner at this rate. It seems like this stuff only happens to him, which is such a shame. Because Australia is kind of his honorary home race because his wife is Australian. So yeah, this is like a second. This is like a home race for him, and to have this go down literally on the first set of stops is just whoa. But at any rate, moving on, Lewis dumped on lap 16. It was a power unit failure brought on about some sort of oiling issue. Mercedes wasn't super specific about what exactly broke. But it's stuff like this that really makes you wonder how on earth did this team win 8 consecutive constructors titles?
I honestly thought that because Lewis had a power unit DNF, that would have spelled bad news for the Williams and I think McLaren, because I think those are also 2 other teams that also use Mercedes power units. So I'm like, okay, there's just an issue with Mercedes power units this weekend. So that means all the rest of these people, George, again, McLaren's, Williams, are just in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing seemed to happen. It seemed to be only an issue with Lewis's car, funny enough.
Yeah, and Aston Martin is still running Mercedes power units too before they switch over to Honda. Funny enough, in 2026, when the power unit regulations change. But yeah, no, it was just a Lewis issue. I still have my concerns about the broad power unit reliability as a whole because a lot of the Mercedes powered teams did have issues at Bahrain at the start of the season. We had kind of talked about that. So we'll see, but it's funny. The one thing that you can traditionally count on with Mercedes, which is even if the rest of the car drives like a tractor, that the power unit's going to be pretty solid, and we're not really seeing that. I know Lewis is doing, some different stuff because he's basically doing what he did in 2022. He's experimenting a lot with setup to try to find something that makes his car feel less like garbage to him, and I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. It's tough to say, but needless to say, it's very not good. Didn't make Q3 and then DNF'd, and Albert Park was traditionally a place where Lewis dominated. But at any rate, this brought out a virtual safety car, which of course slows down the field a little bit. And Alonso took this as an opportunity to basically get a free pit stop. Because you lose way less time doing this under VSC than under normal race conditions. And it kind of worked because it was able to keep them within kind of touching distance of the top 5 for at least for a while thereafter. But basically after this, the race really settled down. It's funny, basically after Lewis DNF, when the race was actually on, I fell asleep. And I went and watched a rebroadcast to prep to write notes, and there really wasn't a whole lot that happened after this point until we basically get to the final lap. Well, it's Alonso again. So he copped a 20-second penalty for what was classed as potentially dangerous driving. And I'll get into kind of the meat and potatoes of what exactly the stewards meant by that, because I know a lot of folks were a bit confused by that. But sort of the TLDR of all of that was just based on some telemetry data from the previous lap. Alonso was going significantly slower based on the same portion of the circuit. I know Alonso likes to do this thing where he likes to kind of back up. If there's a driver that's faster, he likes to kind of try to back them up, make it difficult to overtake. But he massively, massively overjudged it. And this was on a really, really fast part of the circuit too. And just the combination of, the ridiculous overspeed that George had, in combination with the fact that he basically hit dirty air at like the worst possible place that you could hit dirty air at Australia. And he lost the car and had a monumental accident. And the stewards took an extraordinarily dim view of that and hit Alonso with a 20-second penalty, which dropped him from P6 on the road to P8 after the penalty. But if you all will join me in a little bit of stewardese for just a second, where I have a little excerpt of the basically the written steward's message, on the Alonso incident. But anyway, it's basically, so the big thing was that I guess we'll start here, was just that further the stewards considered that they do not have sufficient information to determine whether Alonso's maneuver was intended to cause Russell problems, or whether, as he stated to the stewards, he was simply trying to get a better exit. Should Alonso have the right to try a different approach to the corner? Yes. Should Alonso be responsible for dirty air, which ultimately causes the incident? No. However, he did choose to do something with whatever intent that was extraordinary, i.e., lifting, braking, downshifting, and all the other elements of the maneuver over 100 meters earlier than previously, which is huge, by the way, and much greater than was needed to simply slow earlier for the corner. Yes. By his own account of the incident, he did. And in the opinion of the stewards, by doing this thing, he drove in a manner that was, at the very least, potentially dangerous, given the high-speed nature of that point of the track. First of all, it would be really great if the stewards learned how to use Oxford commas, because that is an absolute nightmare to try to read. Second of all, I do think that's interesting. Basically, the TLDR of that is, Alonso can, racecraft sort of how he chooses, but what he did was just at a very silly point in the circuit. According to something I've read from one of the media, it might have been Autosport, or maybe it was the race. Apparently, the closing speed between Alonso and Russell was better part of 100 kilometers an hour, which is nuts. For those of you that where what is a kilometer? That's about 62 miles an hour. And apparently he was something like 40 or 50 clicks slower than he was the previous lap. So, it's just really, really weird. I understand that the stewards didn't have enough to be like, okay, well, you were very intentionally trying to do something stupid, but that feels too much by just about any metric, to me personally, anyway. And the crash was huge. Watching basically the car, George's car, effectively laying on the left side suspension, kind of tipped over. I don't think I've seen a crash like that ever, actually. But at any rate, the end result was a Ferrari 1-2. Apparently, all Carlos needed was an appendectomy, and the weight reduction there was good for a few tenths, it would appear. With Charles coming home in P2 and Lando rounding out the podium. Oscar Piastri was P4, which continues the streak of Australians not making it on the podium at their home race, which dates back actually quite a ways, back to the days of Coulthard, etc. Coulthard, Weber. But then I was getting to this earlier. Albon, no points. And it had a lot of folks wondering kind of what the point of all of the chassis swap stuff was. And even Albon said that they, basically didn't capitalize because you had Lewis and Verstappen, basically Lewis, Verstappen, Russell, 3 big point scorer DNF. Then you had Alonso get a huge penalty. So it really opened up the floor for folks to capitalize, and Williams didn't. But you know who did? Haas of all teams. Hulkenberg 9th, Magnussen 10th. You mean to tell me that possibly, well, I don't know, Williams might actually take the cake for the least serious team in F1 at the moment, but certainly one of the less serious teams in F1, and they managed to score points. And double points, no less. So that's very, very silly. But But yeah, this race was a little bit chaotic. Certainly not a classic like we've seen of Albert Park's past. And there is certainly, a little bit to come in the post-race stuff. Williams, all of this talk about the spare chassis, that's not going to be ready in time for the Japanese Grand Prix. So now apparently what Williams is having to do is try and fix Albon's basically total chassis. And granted, I don't know enough about how that works. I would think that it would need to be like re-crash tested because I would think it would have been fundamentally compromised. It was compromised enough that they didn't really even try to fix it for this weekend. So I don't know. That doesn't strike me as a great idea, but I also don't build Formula One cars, so I could be completely wrong. And as for the other Australian in the grid right now, is apparently he has been given an ultimatum by VCARB, or I guess, which is really just code for Helmut Marko, which is basically get faster, you lose your seat. Reportedly, Danny has the Japanese and Chinese Grand Prix to try to improve, so that's the next 2 rounds of the season. And if he doesn't, then basically he's out of here, and Liam Lawson would almost certainly inherit the race seat. Which, well, we've talked about it on this show before, but that was who I wanted to stay in the seat anyway after Ricciardo broke his hand at Zandvoort. So it seems like a very roundabout way to get here, but I'll take it, I guess.
I feel like AlphaTauri is a bit of a mess, I can't lie. It's just like, I don't know.
I don't disagree.
You said, like, it initially should have been Lawson that stayed in the seat once Ricciardo broke his hand. I don't know why they did any of this, honestly. It's like, and I don't know. I kind of have doubts that Danny Ric's gonna like suddenly, become like the friggin' 3rd or 4th fastest car on the grid by the time it's again the Japanese Grand Prix and then the Chinese Grand Prix. Like, I just don't. I mean, I could get proven wrong. I mean, weirder things have happened. Stranger things have happened for sure, but I just don't believe that's going to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's the same thing that it always is, and it has always been with Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel, I mean, certainly when he gets in kind of basically a setup, a car window that he likes, he is devastatingly quick. I mean, we've seen that time and time and time again. Basically the first 5 years of his career when he was at Red Bull. But the moment that the car exhibits some kind of funky handling trait, it just completely breaks him. We saw that with the rather capricious McLarens of the last handful of years, and now it's apparently we're seeing it again with this year's AlphaTauri. Or sorry, it's not an AlphaTauri. It's the Racing Bulls.
It's AlphaTauri. This freaking Visa Cash App Red Bull is so stupid. Racing Bulls. I don't know what the hell their name is.
Yeah.
It's AlphaTauri. Same with Sauber, Alfa Romeo, whatever. Freaking Kick Steak. Nobody's calling them that. Like, it's Sauber.
Yeah, it's Sauber. But with the junior team, we'll call it that. Is that
the sugar-free Red Bull team?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Is that it's just Yuki is just so much more adaptable. He is a much more technically minded driver, and that's the other problem. Ricciardo just isn't. Ricciardo, I mean, he drives with vibes, and it's not 1970 anymore. You can't really do that. Having some sort of technical mind to being able to contribute to setup is very, very helpful. I mean, well, heck, we've seen it a whole lot with Lewis basically saying, "I told you so," with these last few years of garbage Mercedes, because they haven't listened to him. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't want to say, Danny Ric washed, because that feels unfair. But certainly there is something about this car and his driving style that just don't mesh. And yeah, like I said, I don't know why he was brought back in the first place. Really, he should have done that TV deal with what was that, Will Arnett? I think they were going to be doing that thing, but then he got the call up to come back after DeVries got sacked, and well, that has not gone very well. But yeah, Liam Lawson is him, and really likes it. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but he should have had the seat in the first place. And this persisting with the Ricardo experiment was, in my opinion, the incorrect decision. But well, I guess we'll have to see what happens. So we'll check in with this space after the Chinese Grand Prix, and we'll see if Daniel Ricciardo still has a seat. But I'm betting on probably not.
Probably not.
But with F1 out of the way, we had another race on Sunday, and that was Thermal Club. What was the official name? The $1 Million Challenge?
The $1 Million Challenge. The $1 Million Challenge that never was. Or, $1 Million Challenge with an asterisk.
Yeah, because technically it wasn't $1 million, not even close. I think we'll get into that, but yes. So I guess it's, as far as I understand it, it was effectively like IndyCar's version of like trying to meld like the Monaco Grand Prix with like the NASCAR All-Star Race.
I mean, I guess it seems more like the All-Star Race, but just a little bit more confusing of a format.
Yeah, the format was so odd. So I guess let's try to explain it, and like I hope we get this right. But it was two qualifying groups by random draw, if I remember correctly. And then
and then whoever got those two qualifying groups qualified, obviously, and then whoever got pole on qualifying group 1 was on pole for heat 1, and then whoever got pole for the qualifying group 2 started on pole for heat 2, and like those are basically the same groups that were together throughout the whole thing, up until we got to the heat race. Then I guess for the main, not really the main event, but like the heat races, drivers had to finish like at least 6th or higher in order to advance to the final round, the actual like all-star race thing. They called it like the sprint for the purse or whatever. And then if you got 7th or below, you got chopped. It's pretty odd. Like the format is very bizarre, if you ask me. But it's not really all that confusing once you like look at it. Like I thought it was kind of confusing, like as leading up to the race. And like all the stuff the series posted about it, I'm like, yeah, I still don't understand what this is actually. But then when I watched, I'm like, oh, this isn't actually that confusing. I guess y'all just didn't explain it that well.
Yeah, and that was basically the conclusion that I had come to. Was certainly, watching the race, it's like, okay, well, actually, this isn't that bad. But trying to figure out what on earth was going on prior to that, it's just like, what is this? It is just, it's so goofy. But at any rate, I guess with the all of the explainers and disclaimers, that'd be the name of kind of a kick-ass indie pop group. Anyway, with all of that out of the way, I guess let's get to the actual qualifying and practices. So I guess the first bit was that once again, new tracks and tearing up cars. It's very funny. A piece of the curbing came up, and it damaged the front wing of Herta's car, which it's basically red flagged the session, obviously, to fix the circuit, which is very silly. And then because of course they're down in the valley, they're in the desert, a dust storm delayed practice, which I just think that's gloriously silly. And the interesting thing was that push to pass was active during qualifying, which I mean, I know it's a new and novel thing. I don't know realistically how much that affected anything, but I mean, sure, why not? Um, Marcus Ericsson just binned it in a spectacular fashion. We talked a bit about the format, but Andretti, well, it seems like we're kind of picking up the storyline from last year, them not doing super well. But all of that is to say that Rosenquist was on pole for Heat 1, and Mr. Inevitable, Alex Palou, was on pole for Heat 2. But the first thing is I would love to touch on for just a second before we move on is the fact that a bit of the circuit broke. I find it hilarious that Thermal Club and basically this country club but for cars, and the circuit broke. It's like, did either the circuit nor IndyCar think to look at this or inspect the circuit to make sure something
Obviously
like this
not.
wasn't gonna? Yeah, I mean clearly, but it's just one of those things. I find it a bit confusing how this managed to slip through their fingers.
I mean, it. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of funny because it reminded me of like the NASCAR Cup Series going to the Indy Road Course that one year. I think it was like the first time they did it, and then that like curbing that came up during the race or whatever, and then they eventually had to just take the whole curbing out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or, if you want to draw, other open wheel parallels, of course, the circuit breaking at Las Vegas, the drain cover that came up and about killed Carlos Sainz in the process. But yeah, no, it's always funny when this kind of stuff happens. But at any rate, so Heat 1, there was lap 1, turn 1 chaos. Dixon gets into Grosjean, and which I mean just yeeted Grosjean across the circuit, and annihilated Rinus VeeKay in the process. Dixon did get a drive-through penalty for his troubles, but all of this left Christian Lundgaard with a damaged side pod, unfortunately. And we talked about it. I think you and I both actually tweeted something very similar after his basically post-crash interview. But Romain Grosjean can be completely faultless, completely blameless for an incident, and yet he still looks like a ginormous cunt. I don't understand it. But
It's just like an incredible feat. Like, how are you still unlikable even though the incident wasn't even your fault? Like, he was over there like cussing at the like safety workers and like pushing them and shit. It's like, bro, they're there to help you and make sure like you're not hurt or anything. Like, why are you like beefing them? Like, if anything, like save that energy. Like, save that energy for Scott Dixon because technically he was the one who caused all this anyways. Like, why don't you? If you want to beef with somebody, beef with the person who caused it all. But I'm like, he had all the smoke for the freaking safety workers, but then I guess none for Scott Dixon, which I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't actually want to like fight Scott Dixon or nothing, because he knows that he might not even be able to win that fight anyways. But I just like, I don't know. Grosjean is just a very like he's a very questionable and interesting character
yeah,
nonetheless.
and it's a funny thing. It's you talk about that. Well, at Mid Ohio, Will Power was ready to have smoke with Dixon. It was very funny.
Well, that's willpower. Everybody knows how he gets down.
Yeah, exactly. But and then that's the other thing. He's like, and who's gonna pay for this and blah blah blah. It's like, dog, you have spent your whole basically IndyCar career up to this point absolutely annihilating everybody around you.
I mean, I don't think Grosjean actually can fight, like, for real. I think what he just does is he'll yell and scream at you in French, but he won't actually, like, do anything.
Which is, well, very stereotypically French, so that kind of makes sense. There was a reason why they got invaded, but we'll leave that there. But yeah, but it was absolute calamity. I mean, to be fair though, you could see the track was so dusty when Heat 1 got underway. Like the rear tires were just throwing up dust on the circuit, and it's just like, holy crap. So, a yucky move combined with low grip, and it's easy to see. How, speaking of which, it was super funny after the heat race, heat one, they talked to Will Power and kind of his perspective as he was going. And I know we'll talk about this in a bit, but dare I say, listening to Will Power's commentary on the lap one, turn one melee may well have been the most interesting part of all of this. Because Will is just kind of vibing, and he's watching the replay with the studio, and he's like, "Oh, yep." It's like, and I saw that coming. It's like, and I thought I was good. Nope, I wasn't good. It's actually the side of Will Power that I genuinely find rather charming. But yes, Rosenquist wins Heat 1. Heat 2 was very quiet. There basically not much of anything. I mean, Rossi had a scrap with Blomqvist for the basically the cutoff spot, but that was really about it. And then we had this break to get the field set where nobody did anything. But we did have Marty Snyder explaining the finer points of tire degradation using what appeared to be a Colby Jack cheese and a kitchen or a cheese grater from one of the suites, that was kind of fun. But that was about the most interesting.
The most intelligent thing that occurred that weekend.
Actually, genuinely. But just a waste of perfectly good Colby Jack. Like I hope you used that for something. But at any rate,
so at least the breakdown goes for the Thermal Club $1 million challenge. Again, $1 million challenge with an asterisk. So usually, I don't know. There was I don't really know who got what. I think like people who were like second, third place got like somewhere like around $350,000 or something like that. But at least as far as it goes for like first place, if you won the race, Alex Palou won the race. And so it says the first place finisher gets $500,000. Obviously, that's not $1 million, that's $500,000. So really, maybe they should have named it to the $500,000 challenge. But whatever. So then the money obviously gets divided up between everybody, and obviously taxes are taken out of it too. And because the race took place in California, it's subject to California's tax laws and stuff like that, which I think are different from a lot of other states. So I think at least after all is said and done, I think the driver themselves actually receives about around 90,000 US dollars. It also depends on what's in that driver's contract and how that money gets divided up too. So it could be like, I would probably say like plus or minus $90,000, at least for first place. It really, again, asterisk, because there's a lot of like fine print in there. But at the end of the day, it was not $1 million challenge, so they lied.
Yeah, it was very much the opposite of that, and even just when they were talking about, oh, well, it's a, $500,000 for each party. I'm like, okay, well, that's still not really a $1 million challenge. Now, is it? And yeah, it adds to the absolute silliness and just uncoordinatedness of this event, honestly. Then you had a sprint to the purse, which was just no bueno. It was so bad. It was just boring, because everybody figured out sort of the meta, which was basically be super slow, run lap times just quick enough to not get lapped, to save fuel and, more crucially, tires. And just ugh. But that being said, there are, things that are inevitable. Death, taxes, and RLL making an absolute meal of something that they really had no business doing. Graham had a stuck throttle. Fittipaldi was somehow underfueled. And then Lundgaard got shuffled to the back of the field for emergency service. Like, what? Like a DNF, a DQ, and then a penalty. I don't understand it, but leave it to RLL to be terrible. Yeah, I was just about to say, leave it to RLL to just be terrible. It's like, how are you go and get disqualified from an exhibition race of all things?
I mean, they do have 2 L's in their name, so they took more than 2 L's this weekend. But
oh god. But yes, but like I said, drivers, they figured out the meta, which was be super duper slow. Colton Herta initially kind of started this, and then Rossi and Canapino were like, "Oh, hey, that actually sounds like a good idea." But it exposed sort of the very deeply ingrained flaws in this format, because basically the first half of the sprint just doesn't matter, because everybody's riding around at quarter speed to preserve fuel and tires. And then, I mean, granted, you got some good stuff with Herta kind of scything his way up through the field, because he was, well, of the runners, he was only ahead of Canapino, I think. And he made his way up to fourth, I think, by the time it was all said and done, was where he ended up finishing. But yeah, it was just boring. Like, genuinely, it was really boring. So, I guess, of course, this always begs the question of what could the series have done better? First, let's start with the good, because I realize I've particularly been kind of ripping on this event the whole time. But it's good to have a race that fills the stupendously long gap between St. Pete and Long Beach. That has been an issue that I have had with effectively the current calendar for a while. It's like you have St. Pete, and then you get 6 to 8 weeks until you get to Long Beach, and it just really sucks any of the momentum out of the series.
Yeah, because I've seen people talk about how, like, at least I saw one person mention that the reason, like, that huge gap that you have between, like, St. Pete and then the next race, that the massive gaps that IndyCar has in their schedule kind of is what, like, deters them. Like, it makes it hard for them to, like, be invested in the series and, like, keep watching it, because it's like the momentum is just, like, not really there. It's like you have St. Pete, and then, again, super long gap, the next race being Long Beach. The next race would have been Long Beach if they didn't do Thermal Club. So I'm just like, yeah, I guess, like, it's something, it's I guess a good way, like, they need to find some way to fill the gap. But I don't think doing Thermal Club was necessarily it, because I don't think the execution was there. I don't think the execution was great at all. In fact, I think it was awful. Possibly a different format. Like, I think the big thing that I had, one of the main issues that I had with this event was the format. I just wasn't really vibing with it. Somebody suggested that, like, they could have, like, a lap knockout, which basically would mean that the last person at the end of every lap gets knocked out, and it would keep continuing until there was only one person left, which I'm like, that would be incredibly chaotic, don't get me wrong, but it would also be very fun. So I'm like, I don't know, why not? And then the last thing, it would be better if they had a different venue entirely. Like, I get, like, the appeal of Thermal Club, because I mean, I guess, like, there's people with money there and you want them investing into, like, the teams and stuff like that. But at the same time, Thermal Club is not meant for actual wheel-to-wheel proper racing. Like, again, like we said, it's basically just a private club, like a country club, but for cars. Like, it's meant, like, the type of racing that the people had in mind when they built the track was rich dude number one in, like, a BMW M2 racing rich dude number two in, like, a Porsche, like, GT3 RS or something. Like, it's not meant for, like, legit racing, which is probably why, like, it wasn't that great. I mean, there was a lot of speculation there was going to be, like, no passing whatsoever throughout the weekend, but I'm like, there was some passing, but it's just like, it just wasn't that great. And people were like, oh, this track is asked for racing. I'm like, yeah, it's because that's not what it was meant for. So if they were to do this, I would rather them go to a different venue altogether and forget Thermal Club, and just relegate Thermal Club to, being a facility that they use it for testing, because, it's fine. I mean, sure, the mountains and the scenery were pretty. That's about the only thing I enjoyed about the whole fucking thing was the scenery. But other than that, no.
Yeah, and that's the thing, okay, fine. You wanna, schmooze with all the rich folks. It's like, then maybe like livery season, debut season, maybe gather up everybody and head over. I genuinely think that that wouldn't be bad because then folks, teams can do basically parade laps with, the new schemes. And I think that would be a better use of Thermal Club than trying to basically force it to be a basically a racing venue. Um and here's the thing, it's like, from what I heard from the people that, went to Thermal Club, they didn't really have a good time. And then the folks that, are, card carrying members of Thermal Club seemed bored to tears. So it doesn't really seem like anybody had a good time.
I mean, it's funny because I guess people like it was supposed to be like a made for TV event, but I'm like,
It was
it was
horrible
boring
fun.
as fuck. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know. They just missed the mark on that, honestly.
Yeah, I was just about to say I was absolutely it was a miserable time watching it on television. So like, but But of course, as unsurprisingly, when you have a new event like this and lots of sort of dueling opinions, you had lots of sort of post race nonsense on social media. Um, and our least favorite driver, Connor Daly, decided that he wanted to throw his inflation adjusted 2 cents in, basically saying that people weren't real racing fans because they didn't like the race. His exact quote was, "No one is ever going to be fully happy, and some people are going to be angry with everything. But you got free racing to watch on Sunday, and if you're just going to sit here and say I don't want to watch it, and that means you're not a race fan."
It's like, well,
Which,
guess what, bitch? I watched the whole thing from start to finish, green to checkered, and everything between, and I still didn't like it. So you can't sit here and call me a fake racing fan just because I didn't like what I saw and I watched the whole thing. So now what? And the thing about it was, he was actually on his podcast talking about the race early on, talking about how it probably wasn't going to be that good. And then now he switches up and it's like, oh no, like he's switching up and calling people fake racing fans and shit. It's like, I mean, I get it. I kind of get the switch up anyways because he was paid by the series to be there, by the way. So, like, I mean, that wasn't a shocker or anything.
I
Like,
didn't know that.
that's
Okay.
publicly known information. They paid him to be there along with some other folks. So, I get it. That's probably why he's glazing the series so hard and trying to cape for it and say that it and make it out to be something that it wasn't. Because okay, you got a check. So yeah, I would do the same thing too. I'd lie and say, oh yeah, hype the shit up, gas it up, everything, even if it wasn't all that. If I was getting paid, I mean, it probably would depend on how big the paycheck is. But I mean, shit, I would do it. So I kind of get it. But at the same damn time, he's being incredibly disingenuous or disingenuous. How do you call it?
No, I completely agree. It's extraordinarily disingenuous, and it's like it's big talk from somebody who can't hold down a riot to save his life. Honestly, like like it wasn't fun, because I had some other stuff going on. I certainly did not watch flag to flag, session to session coverage. Just my schedule did not permit that. But I watched the heats and I watched the main feature, and I just did not think that this was a good event. Um, and there's certainly some other stuff. I think it was actually Elizabeth Blackstock who was tweeting about it and talking about actively being a little concerned sort of about the broader health of the series, because it feels like the little bit of momentum that they had started to build up, they are squandering with these weird events, that
I mean, some of
nobody
that
asked
momentum
for.
even got like squandered or like snuffed out during the off season with all the like bullshit that happened during the off season, and like
Well,
it's
yeah,
kind
there's
of
that.
still continuing to happen. Like I think at this point, IndyCar, the news cycle for IndyCar might end up turning into the news cycle for F1. Honestly, which I'm
Oh
dreading
God,
that,
please
but I feel
don't.
like it might end up happening. Honestly, and I honestly like I cannot stand like the like fake versus real like racing fan argument. Like I
It's
just
so
like I
dumb.
cannot stand that and so many people like to do that. I don't know why. So it's like I feel like that makes you a real racing fan if you dislike something a racing series that you really like does. Like, I feel like that makes me a real fan, just because I'm able to, at the same time, while liking the series, I can also criticize them for things that I don't think are right or that they need improvement on. Like, I don't think that that makes me fake, because like it makes me more of a real racing fan than people who want to sit up here and like pretend that everything's all kosher and all good when it's not. It's like, no, there are plenty of racing series I'm like, I love them dearly. Like IMSA, I love it dearly. I love it. Like it's has a special place in my heart. But there are things that they do that I get on them constantly for. I will grill them and I will keep doing it because I'm like, I care about it. And I feel like the current way that they're going about it is not correct. So if that's how I feel, I'm going to say that. I don't think that I'm any less of a fan if I decide to criticize the series. And it's like, and then some people are also saying that like the point about like they don't really know what people want, what IndyCar fans want. I'm like, if you're saying that, like you kind of just aren't paying attention to what people are saying, because I feel like plenty of IndyCar fans like sound off on what they want from the series and what they want the series to do and what direction they want the series to go in. If you're saying that you don't know what people want at this point in big 2024, you are just not paying attention. You're not paying attention, or you are seeing what people are saying and completely disregarding it and be like, no, we don't need to listen to these people. And it's like technically the series is beholden to fans. Like the series, a lot of racing, like racing series and sport, a lot of sports in general wouldn't fucking exist without fans. So I mean, like, don't bite the hand that feeds you or whatever.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. Certainly fake versus, real racing fans. It seems to just be another odd way folks have found to, gatekeep and high horse, whenever folks, broadly speaking, don't like something. And it's very, very frustrating. But yeah, and we talked about this when we did the big Indy car kind of off-season sort of roundup thing that we recorded around Christmas. Um, is that I don't know who IndyCar's kind of ears on the ground are and what's getting lost in translation from that up to series execs, but
As far as I'm concerned, it's nobody, because Mark Miles said himself that he doesn't look at social media. So, I mean, we already know right there it's
yeah,
not him. And
yeah.
technically, he's probably one of the people that should be looking at social media, even though I'm sure they probably would have seen what happened the previous weekend and saw that everybody was just grilling, like just nonstop flaming Thermal Club, and probably would have just closed the app and wouldn't have paid attention to it and never opened it again.
Yeah. Pardon me, but yeah, it's just yeah, I don't know, but they really, like I said, certainly in 2024, given how easy it is to access these opinions, certainly if you don't know, well, frankly, if you don't know what your fan base wants, you're an idiot. And
They
granted
also
that
sent out a fan survey too. They sent out one like last season, the season before too. So it's like you have data. So
Mhm.
whether or not you actually do something with the data that you are collecting, or maybe pretending to collect, I don't know. I really don't know at this fucking point. But you have it. The information is there and pretty easy to access. So I mean, like you said, if you don't know what your fans want, you're a moron. You're an absolute moron.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. You know, I guess the kind of the way to sum up this kind of long-winded tangent is that well, this Connor Daly's an idiot, first of all. And number two is that yeah, they like, I don't know, okay, fine, Mark Miles doesn't pay attention to social media. It's like, but fine, but pay somebody who does then. So that way you don't have to open up Twitter and get your feelings hurt, but then you can still get the information that you need. Because the overwhelming opinion was that this just was not it. Um, and speaking things that are not it, it's funny. I saw this morning and was like aghast But apparently Thermal's rent-a-cops were roughing up folks, roughing up team members.
They were apparently. I mean, I read like some of the like notes and stuff that like Marshall Pruitt
Mm-hmm.
was, and it's like all the way at the bottom of like there was a section that said like miscellaneous notes. It said that like some team members, it was from like the team will remain anonymous because I don't think they didn't want to put out who exactly it was and what team it was and who people were associated with. But it's like I guess they got in like a dispute with like the private contracted security personnel that were at Thermal Club over like some type of dispute with like accessing like an area with a golf cart or something. And I'm like, I don't know, like okay, I mean, I'm not shocked that Thermal Club has fake ass rent-a-cops because I mean it's a place for rich people, and of course you need rich people to have the illusion that they're safe in their little bubble that they exist in. So it's not too shocking, but the fact that they are almost kind of acting similar to actual real cops and have to have power trips and shit like that where they push people around and they want to feel like they have power over people. I'm like, okay, can we just like cancel this whole thing? Like pretend this whole event just never happened.
Yes, and that this is the one time where it's like, okay, all right, IndyCar, I need you to act more like your brother, NASCAR. Because I'm sorry, if that had happened in NASCAR, you'd have like a whole team fighting them if something like that went down. Like you'd have garages, the hauler areas clearing with folks to come fight. It's like, all right, IndyCar, I need a little bit of that energy because yeah, that's just unacceptable to sit here and accost and assault, um, team members, folks who are there to run the event about it. I mean, we heard about this with Brad Pitt's posse at Daytona. And it's just like,
Oh
all right.
yeah, I think they were pushing around like fans and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah,
I'm
and they
like,
say they
okay,
were
if you're
bothering
gonna go
drivers.
to the
Mm-hmm.
Rolex 24, which is like one of the biggest races on the planet, and you like fans have access and fans have the right to have that access, like you should know that, and you shouldn't be like pushing around fans. And I mean, probably I think some of them might have been pushing around drivers too, and like some drivers couldn't get access to like the bus lot or something because like I don't know, they were acting like super weird with like security. I remember like a bunch of drivers talking about that. Like I don't know, I'm just like, it's just so weird.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just like I said, that is just like so not good. And the funny thing is that Christian Lundgaard has very much been kind of sticking his neck out against the event, which is kind of surprising. Um, but even going so far as to say that the team might not come back if this event is on the schedule again next year, because basically it's pointless to potentially ruin your cars and get nothing out of it, which, I mean, he's not wrong. I'm just very surprised to hear a driver being so vocal about that point.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm just like, good on him. Like somebody needs to say something. I mean, people may not like it, they might get upset at it, specifically the executives, but I'm like, who cares at this point? Like I feel like we're beyond the point of no return, or beyond the point of, I don't know, caring about what Mark Miles and Roger Penske and company think.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like I said, I'm certainly not mad at him. I applaud the fact that he's willing to do this. But like I said, like you said, I'm just surprised um, to hear somebody doing this. And truth be told, even for all of the other nonsense that has accompanied this event this week or this past week, I guess more accurately, um, this would probably be the nail in the coffin for this at least this in its current form as a concept. Um, but yeah, that's huh. But at any rate, speaking is funny, we talked about IndyCar news cycle stuff. Well, there's news that's cycled to cover. Um, so the big thing is that officially IndyCar has banned the Dragon move at IMS. And this was being very, very heavily rumored and speculated that this was going to go the way of the dodo bird, and well, it indeed has. I know it was on the ground sort of safety because folks were dipping basically practically into the pits to try to basically keep the toe of the lead car, and there were safety concerns as a result of this. It's funny, of course, we always, kind of ask these, we phrase these, kind of binarily, good question or good decision or not, rather. And I'm actually a little torn on this one because I think it looks kind of neat. And I think it is an interesting bit of strategy. And so from that perspective, I'm bummed to see it go. But, certainly on the grounds of safety, I totally understand that and agree with that. So I don't really know quite where I stand on that.
I mean, I kind of agree with it, honestly. Like, yeah, like, again, it does look cool, but at the same time, I'm like, I mean, like, we don't really know how close we are to, like, an actual disaster happening with somebody doing that, and then somebody crashes at that little, like, pylon thing or whatever, or, whatever, some, like, huge, spectacular, pretty rough crash happens. So I'm like, yeah, you might as well just go ahead and be proactive and ban that shit before, somebody, ends up becoming a part of the catch fence or something.
Yeah, which certainly with the way that they run, sometimes that is not out of the question. But yes, but and additionally, you know, Michael Michael Andretti, that boy's got a lot of dip on his chip these days. Scrapping with FOM and the FIA, and now effectively seems to be poised to kind of go toe to toe with Penske. Because him, Zach Brown, and a handful of other owners have effectively formed kind of a coalition. With the idea being on, for the millionth time in the last, 25 years trying to grow the series. I applaud it. I am certainly not mad at that as a turn of events, but it's just like I said, watching Michael basically get embroiled basically in the happenings in another series is just kind of funny. But really, it's necessary. We were just talking about it earlier. Concerned about any sort of growth and kind of that stagnating and even potentially the series starting to shrink again, which it really cannot afford to do. So the fact that all of the team owners seem to recognize this and seem to be ready to do something is encouraging.
Yeah, it definitely is, especially since the leadership doesn't seem like they're interested in doing anything, which I'm like, at this point, probably, I don't know, fire Mark Miles and Penske for sure. I mean, Penske, I mean, yeah, he knows how to run race teams and shit like that. He's a businessman or whatever, but how he really doesn't know how to run like a racing series. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like I said, I don't know. We talked about it again in the big IndyCar roundup, which since I'm referencing it again, you should go listen to that. But yeah, certainly when Roger was taking a more active role in the series, I was genuinely kind of excited because or has had basically a team in just about every series known to man at some point. So I'm like, okay, well, if anybody knows how to do this, it's him. But this is really not gone to plan. Like I said, if anything, it seems like the little bit of momentum that the series had picked up in the last couple of years is just gone. And I think that's a real shame. And like I said, the series really can't afford to go the opposite way. It's been 25 years and the series really hasn't recovered from the split still. So, we'll have to see. But yeah, it is not good. But in additional news, IndyCar announced admittedly a little while ago as of the time of this recording, but there's been a lot going on, so sue me. Actually, don't. Um, and that there will be a new chassis and powertrain circa 2027. Now it's funny, reading the notes because my wonderful co-host wrote the notes for the IndyCar part of this episode, and better late than never was the sort of sub bullet point there. And while I broadly agree with that, I would also like to posit that given that the garbage with the hybrid has not quite gone according to plan, I don't know, it could be 2028 or 2029 when we get those changes if certainly the current track record is anything to go by.
I mean, hopefully it's sooner because, I mean, again, you do have the pressure from Honda because they're already
Very
probably
angry,
fed
yes.
up with the bullshit. So if they leave, like, that, I'm hoping that, like, I don't know, gets some urgency. Because I'm like, okay, you only have two OEMs in IndyCar. It's Honda and Chevy. And it's like you can't really afford to lose one. Because if you do, it's like you're in pretty big fucking trouble. So I'm like, hopefully that is enough to do something that they actually will be on time with it.
Yeah, I hope so too. That would be cool. But like I said, certainly IndyCar's recent track record of getting changes on the ground when they're supposed to is not good. And so that concerns me a little bit. But yeah, we'll see what happens. And in other news, we are going ahead with the charter system. According to Mark Miles, the idea is to have this concept sort of completed by the 500. The current proposals was that there will not be guaranteed entries to the 500, which is good. And the fact that there was even conversation to the contrary, like at all, is incredibly stupid. But well, they saw the light, and that won't be a thing. Still think the idea of a charter system in IndyCar is dumb and unnecessary, but clearly the powers that be don't agree. So, hey ho. And additionally, IndyCar is gonna switch up the marketing a bit here. I guess at some point during the year. The idea is to target younger fans, which again, my question is, what younger fans and where? I would almost posit to argue that you and I probably are what would count as the youngest fans at this point.
I mean, I don't know what they mean by younger fans. Like, do they mean like teenagers? Do they mean like little kids? Do they mean like people in their 20s? Because I mean, technically, people in their 20s are considered young to IndyCar's main fan base of like people who were, essentially like 50 and up. So I don't really know what that means.
Yeah, I don't either. But again, it's Jamie, but it's the typical thing that you see now. I mean, it's not just IndyCar, but you see it all across, marketing landscapes. As we have to appeal to the younger demographic, and that's basically what this is. Being somewhat obtuse when asking that question, but I get what they mean. Yeah, they're dropping the "Defy Everything" slogan, which I mean, good, because what does that mean? Particularly in the context of motorsports.
Define good marketing strategies.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I don't know. It reminds me of like when Cadillac did that whole "Dare Greatly" thing for a little bit. It's like, what are you talking about? That's kind of what "Defy Everything" felt like to me. Um, we don't know because they haven't unveiled what the new marketing material is going to be going forward. So I guess we'll see when they unveil it and how well it works. I'm assuming that much like basically everything IndyCar has done in the last couple of years, it's going to land with a thud. But I'd like to be wrong.
I mean, as long as I don't really think they need a slogan per se. So as long as they don't do that, I feel like it might be fine. Honestly, I still think they need to like tap into like, like the memes and stuff because really that's what people like. That's what younger fans that's what gets younger fans like interested in stuff. I mean, I know like a lot of the old heads don't like it. Like they are staunchly against it. A lot of them are like, no, we don't like being silly because it's, it makes you look unserious. And I'm like, you can have a balance of being serious and unserious at the same time. And plus, you can't really be serious all the time because you also need to, market drivers to the point where like they're personable and you actually want to want to get to know them, and like that they're not just like robots or something like that, that they're actual like human beings with like actual emotions, and they do same human things that everybody else does. So it's like
why Bus Bros was so
can't be serious all
successful.
the time.
Yeah. It's exactly why Bus Bros was so successful, because it was the first time that we had really seen anything like that in IndyCar. And it was like, oh, these guys are silly and kind of fun.
Bus Bros Penske games was pretty successful.
Yep, exactly. So, there's certainly, there's room for to have both, but they need to do something because once again, I feel like a bit of a broken record this episode, but it's just it feels it's just like I said, I feel like the sport has just stagnated quite significantly here in these last couple of years, and like it's like that meme where he's poking it with the stick, like come on, do something. That's what it feels like here as of late. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But that has been another episode of Chicanery. So next up on the docket is the Japanese Grand Prix, as well as Long Beach for both IMSA and IndyCar. So that'll be next. But those are just a few fun things to sort of look forward to on the horizon. So with that being said, I am your host, Janny, and this has been another episode of Chicanery. Until next time, everyone.